Good evening. Thanks for travelling in such awful weather today as well. I'd like to welcome all the members, officers and members of the public and those that are watching at home from Finance and Audit and Risk Committee. I'd also like to say welcome to our colleagues from Ernst & Young and John, our independent advisor. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer, Eleanor Hopcroft, to take the roll call of officers attending online and explain how proceedings will work.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to take a quick roll call of officers attending online to make sure they can hear and we can hear them. So do we have Ruben Ayavu?
Present.
Thank you. Do we have Nick Jennings?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Antonio Chiampa?
Present.
Thank you. And do we have Chris Wood?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Is there anyone else in attendance online that I haven't called out? Okay. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. Please wait for the chair's invitation before you begin. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the result will be visible in the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have a casting vote. Are there any questions before we start? Okay, I'll hand back to Councillor Tyler.
Thank you, Eleanor. Apologies for absence is item 1. We've had apologies from Councillor Terry Hone. Are there any other apologies that we need to record? There must be more. No. Okay. All right. Well, in that case, we'll move on to item 2 then. The minutes of the 25th of January, our last meeting, and I propose that we take these as read and approved as a true record of the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of January 2023. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Claire Billing seconding. Okay. Eleanor, can we take it to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thank you. Notification of other business. There's no other business been notified to me. Item 4, the Chair's announcements. In accordance with the Council's policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recordings will be available to view on ModGov or via the NHDC YouTube channel. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the Chair's announcements on the agenda. For the purposes of clarification, 4.8.23a of the Constitution does not apply to this meeting. Therefore, a member may leave the room during the debate and consideration of an item and be able to vote. However, please be mindful of the business on the agenda and whenever possible, leave an appropriate point in the meeting. The next bit I wanted to talk about or say is that we've lost a former councillor, John Bishop, who passed away yesterday. And I think it would be very appropriate for us to have a minute's silence, if everybody's okay with that. Okay, I don't know. I sort of feel that maybe I should stand for that. If Moving on to item 5, public participation. We have no public participation this evening. And then swiftly moving on to item 6, the annual government statement. I'd like to invite Ruben Avivu. Oh, I'm not really to pronounce your surname. Avivu?
Avivu, but close enough,
Avivu.
Chair. Thank you.
Oh, I do apologise.
That's all right.
Ruben Avivu, the policy and community manager, to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks the approval of the annual government statement for the year 2021 and 22 and the corresponding action plan. I'm going to skim through the highlights of the report as I brought the draft annual government statement to you in December. We circulated to various partners. At 5.1, I've taken the time there to set out the amendments that were made to Principle F with additional information. Principle G, additional information around the assurances from the service directors, and then an updated reference to the Ernst Young external annual report. Just to say that this needs to be approved in advance of statements of accounts, which is why we're here tonight to do that. And then the draft is at Appendix A for your consideration and approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ruben. Is there any questions for Ruben from the committee or the anybody? No. Okay. Oh, sorry, John. Sorry, John Cannon.
Oh, just to close the loop, I remember asking a question about the contents of this document when it was first tabled. I was just asking for a couple of additions to be made where appropriate, and I thought the ones you've made were quite informative. I like the reference to the Internal Audit Service, for example, and the data sharing piece. So recognise and thank you.
Thank you very much.
No other questions? Okay. Yeah. Actually, I was a little bit confused with this one. Well, should we be doing debate before a proposal? Vote, just to check. All right, I'm being confused. All right, okay. Okay. So the proposal is. I propose that the annual government statement be accepted. Can I have a seconder, please? Okay. Oops, Councillor Nolan. Thank you. Right, the debate then. Is there any debate on this subject? No, nothing's coming up. Right. The recommendations is the committee is recommended to approve the amended AGS and action plan in Appendix A. And if Eleanor, can you take us to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, item 7, local code of governance. I'd like to invite Ruben Avivu, policy and community manager, to present. Apologies about any. Ruben.
Thank you, Chair. This report brings the local code of governance, which is what the annual government statement is based on. It sets out those 7 principles, and I'm looking for your approval to set this for 2023. So when I come back to you in a year's time, this is what we will measure our good governance against. It is good practice to have one, as 7.1 says. It's based on the Sit for Solace framework of delivering good governance to local government, based on the 2016 edition. It shows it's an effective scheme against we measure our operational governance, and the Appendix A sets out what it looks like, those principles in broad terms, and we've updated it against our council objectives at section 4. And just to say that we'll come back in 2024 to relook at it again, unless something significant happens in between times. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ruben. Would anyone like to ask some questions, Ruben, on this subject? Yeah, Councillor Nolan.
Yeah, so I suspect it may be too early in certain cases, but given recent events at some other authorities across the country that relate to, I suppose, good governance being the primary issue, if not in this year's submission, but potentially in the future, will we look to bring in lessons that have been taken away from the investigations undertaken at those authorities, principally those that have experienced, I suppose, close to bankruptcy issues due to some of the decisions made, particularly around investments?
Ruben?
This might be one for Ian as well, but as we go through the year, we do gather evidence against good governance, and those things are applicable. So as you say, those local authorities that are having financial difficulties, we will be making sure we learn those lessons, and whatever comes out of that, we will be certainly applying to our own governance as well.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. Thank you, Ruben, for Councillor Nolan. Claire Billing.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about whistleblowing, whether that's included or if it comes under one of the headings.
It does. I couldn't tell you which one it does at the moment, but we have, as a part of our staff development, we asked for an annual declaration of each staff member to say they've read the anti-fraud, whistleblowing, and other relevant policies as well. So, but that is included, and it certainly is in the longer self-assessment document, which is online at the moment.
Does that answer your question, Claire? Thank you. Thanks, Ruben. Ian.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to reiterate what Ruben said in relation to the question before that. So as myself as the Chief Finance Officer and our Service Director for Legal and Community as the Monitoring Officer, definitely pay heed to what's going on in other authorities, and we have regular meetings to sort of talk about governance issues alongside the Managing Director. And equally, as part of a wider leadership team, we also look at those issues. So please be assured we are always on the ball, hopefully, with those kind of things, and yeah, keeping on top of them. And we are, in terms of investments, we are nowhere near the scale of some of those issues that have been taking place in our authorities. We have very low levels of investment properties, and we have no borrowing against any of those either.
Thank you, Ian. Therefore, if there's anybody else want to ask questions, no, nobody coming up. Okay. Then I propose that the annual approval of the local code of corporate governance 2023 Appendix A be accepted. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Billing, seconder. Any debate on this subject? Nope. Okay. In that case, Eleanor, can you take us to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 8, which is the audit results report. I'd like to invite Debbie Hanson and Rachel Juarez to present.
Thank you, Chair. By way of introduction, this is our audit results report, which we're required to present to you under ISA 260 before we conclude the audit and issue our opinion, and before you also approve the accounts. I would note that we were lucky enough to attend the first part of this session, which was the training session. I think Ian has very diligently covered a number of the issues that are in our report, so we will obviously refer to those, but we won't duplicate what Ian has already kind of gone through with you in terms of the issues identified. We will take the report as read, so we won't take you through every page of it, but what we will do is highlight to you the key issues, and I'll hand over to Rachel at that point to talk you through the key risk areas, the work that we've undertaken, and the key findings from our work. I would say that the audit is substantially complete. There is some review to be finalised from myself and a little bit from Rachel, but nothing that I would expect would result in any further amendments to the accounts, although that is always possible, but I think very unlikely based on the limited amount of work that remains to be completed. We drafted the report as at 24th of February, and things have moved on since that date. So again, we will update you on anything that has changed since we drafted the report to the current position as of today. So what I'd like to do is take you through, first of all, just a couple of messages from the executive summary, which starts in section 1 of the report, and that's on page 45. So there have been no changes to the scope of our audit since the plan we presented to you right before Christmas. So we've actually delivered the work as we intended. We've revisited performance materiality and overall materiality, and we're satisfied that those remain appropriate. And the levels that we set for those is 1.4 million as our overall materiality level, which represents 2% of gross expenditure, and then a slightly lower level of just over 1 million, which is what we use as our performance materiality, which is the level that actually drives the testing that we undertake on the account. So we tested a slightly lower level to ensure we pick up any risk of error. We expect to issue an unqualified opinion on the conclusion of the audit, and we've also not identified any significant issues from the work that we've undertaken on value for money. I would note that we haven't fully completed our value for money risk assessment procedures, but based on the meetings we've had with management, our review of minutes, our knowledge of the sector and our knowledge of the council, we don't expect to identify any issues from the completion of that work either. I would note that unfortunately we're not going to be in a position to issue the certificate alongside the audit opinion. The certificate is basically issued to say that we've concluded all of our statutory responsibilities under the NAO code. And although the WGA instructions have been issued by the NAO, which is the whole of government accounts work we have to do on their behalf, and the council falls below the threshold that requires detailed work, the approach the NAO are taking for this current year and the previous year is that they're actually sampling some authorities that have fallen below that threshold. They haven't yet confirmed which authorities they are sampling to ask for additional work to be undertaken. And so until they do that, we can't say that we've concluded all of our responsibilities. So we're therefore not able to issue our certificate. That is not unique to North Hertfordshire. We're in that position on every single council that we audit, and every audit firm is in that same position. So it just means that we can't issue that certificate until we're in a position to say that we don't have to do any work on the WGA work. I think in terms of VFM, like I said, we haven't identified any risks at the moment. We have identified a number of audit adjustments which are listed in the report, and which Ian talked you through the key ones before the meeting. So I won't go on those, but Rachel will refer to those. What I would refer you to is page 72 of the report, where we do make some recommendations around the control environment in relation to the cash flow statement, and also the fixed asset register in particular. Again, in the earlier session, Ian has already referred to that work that's ongoing in terms of just doing some cleansing and housekeeping on the fixed asset register. And so we're very encouraged to see that the authority is already responding to the findings of the audit before we've actually formally reported them. So that's very positive. So at that point, I will hand over to Rachel to talk you through the detail of the actual risks that we identified and the key findings from our work.
Thank you, Debbie. So for our first risk, misstatements due to fraud or error, we didn't find any issues regarding that one. On the second risk, inappropriate capitalization of revenue spend, where we selected samples of additions and checked if there is an appropriate capitalization requirement for those. We didn't find any issues on that either. On the third point, valuation of investment properties, again, we selected samples and we didn't find any material errors within that. I would draw your attention, however, on PPE valuation, in which the balances are generally okay, except for a few issues that we've noted. So one of the errors that were noted and was also mentioned in the report of the Service Director Resources in item 9, which will proceed after this, is the duplicate asset in the fixed asset register called Museum Services Development, and that's 5.6 million as of 31st of March 21-22. Ian also mentioned earlier that this will impact the prior year figures. So there is an adjustment in the comparatives for 2021 and 1920 as well for this one. We are aware that the council management has performed a procedure to identify if there are any other assets that fall within this issue. I think there are a few assets that fall within that although the impact is not as material, it's just above 1 million. And the management has also opted to adjust for that. The next issue that we've noted is in relation to revaluation reserves. So Ian has explained earlier that some of the upward movement in valuation would have to go to revaluation reserve, and some of that would have to go to provision of services. So in this case, 178,000 of upward movement in value has gone to revaluation reserve when it has, which should have gone to provision of services. We are querying a few other assets if the same issue is occurring in those assets. And I think that's one of the issues that we are still following up on. Similarly, for the assets held for sale movement that was charged to revaluation reserve and it should have gone to provision of services. As noted earlier, this does not impact the general fund balances, but would go to other side of reserves, which fall under unusable reserves. So those ones have been included in our report. So as Debbie mentioned earlier, from the date of our provisional audit results report, we've performed additional procedures. We've noted 1.5 million of other land and buildings assets that need to be reclassified to other PPE categories. So it does not impact the overall balance of PPE, but just the split between the assets within the PPE categories. So management also opted to adjust for those. And there is a minor disclosure point that we raised as well, which relates to the summary of assets that were revalued each year, which management also agreed to include in the statement of accounts. Are there any questions so far on that point?
I've got one. When you were talking about we can't issue the certificate yet because there's work to be done. Do we know sort of time scale that it might take before that happens, or is it as long as it's going to take?
Unfortunately, we don't have an idea because we're still in that same position in relation to 2021 audits where, as I said, the NAO's approach has changed in that previously they set a threshold, and if bodies were above that threshold, auditors had to undertake procedures on the whole of government account submission. For bodies below that threshold, we didn't have to do any work at all. As I said, last year, they then changed that approach, and what they want to do now is sample a selection of bodies below the threshold and ask auditors to perform some procedures on those. As I said, they haven't yet told us for last year which bodies they want us to do additional work on. And so until they've done that, they're unlikely to tell us about 21, 22 either. So it's we have no idea. We ask very regularly when we have calls with the NAO as to when we might be told which bodies will be sampled so we can get some certificates issued.
Thank you.
Do we continue, Rachel?
Yep,
yeah.
I would. So for the next item, net pension liability value. In our report, we mentioned that we were still waiting for the assurance letter from the pension fund auditor. So I'm happy to share that we've got a draft version of that now, and has got just one minor error adjustment that we need to report. The other side of that, however, is the council has received an updated actuary report, which showed an increased value of net pension liability by 2 million. The council has also agreed to adjust for that. And then another area that we need to report on was the benefits paid. This is included in the assurance letter from the pension fund auditor. So they've identified a difference of 617,000 in terms of net pension benefit. So this does not impact the overall balance of the pension liability, but it impacts one of the disclosure tables within note 39, but it's a very minor disclosure. And we're happy not to.
We're happy to basically, if the council adjusts that, that's fine. If it's not adjusted, we'll include it in the letter of representation as to a reason why that's not been adjusted. But we haven't had a chance to discuss that with the finance team yet because we've only had the draft assurance letter from the pension fund auditor, and we are waiting the final one just to confirm that.
Yeah. So continuing on to going concern now, in our report, we reported that this work is ongoing, but as of today, we have completed that work and there is no issue coming out of that work. Other differences we've reported in the audit results report related to the classification between short-term creditors and grants received in advance. So this is a difference of 2.6 million. Again, it does not impact the total asset balance, but just a reclassification between liability. The other one was the treatment of some of the transactions within the cash flow statements. And management has also opted to adjust for this. So I guess the status of other procedures, which Debbie has already mentioned. One thing I'd like to point out, however, was one of the investment confirmations from Santander, which we are, and management is also chasing for us. But this one needs to be completed before we can issue the opinion. And yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah. So we're very happy to take any questions or comments on the report. I think overall we'd like to say a big thank you there to the finance team for all their support in the audit. We started this just before Christmas.
Yes,
I think so. We're very pleased to be in this position this early in March that the audit is substantially complete, bar a few small issues which are largely outside the control of the council. As I said, as Rachel has highlighted, the Santander confirmation is a confirmation we need to obtain. And the council is helping to try to get that for us from Santander, and the other areas should be concluded very shortly. So overall, we are aiming to complete and sign the audit by the end of March, which I think is a very positive picture.
Thank you, Debbie and Rachel. Ian, did you want to say anything about this Santander statement?
We are chasing. That's what I can say, really. This is, yeah, this all starts way back in the year, but sometimes banks and beyond societies can be a little bit difficult.
Do we have any questions for Rachel and Debbie? Councillor Billing. Oh, and sorry.
I don't think it's really for Rachel or you. It's more to do with our learning regarding there seem to be several issues of misclassification of amounts, which doesn't affect the overall amount that we have. But is that something that's normal? Is that a general thing that happens, or is there some learning to put in place there?
I was going to cover that next report, but I'll do it now because that's absolutely fine to either place. I think in terms of the fixed assets and the numbers there, I think there's probably too many for my liking. I don't know if there's anything I'm fundamentally concerned about, but I still like to not be in the place we're in where we're making quite so many adjustments. So as I put in the next report, we are going to be looking at the fixed asset register and how we can make that simpler and easier to follow through to make sure the chance of mistakes is less. I think the other things that have cropped up in terms of cash flow, yes, we should have spotted it, but it's quite a technical bit of the guidance. And the other bits, I think, are ones where, yes, the odd error creeps in from time to time in the accounts, and we're happy to adjust for them now they've been found. So fixed asset, yes, learn from that. We'll make sure we kind of continue to keep on top of the SIPA guidance in terms of that side of it. But I think in every year, there's a few errors that crop up that audit will find and will adjust for. So I'm taking action, but I'm not excessively concerned.
John Cannon.
Thank you. I appreciate the pace this year is much improved on last year, which is great news. I appreciate you're also tied to the NAO's timetable of work. So I just wonder, have we hit a peak? Is that as good as it gets, or might the time lag reduce further? Because you appreciate we're in March 2023, signing off accounts for 2022 is a whole year's time lag.
I think the position will get better, and I'm desperately trying to remember when the audit is scheduled. Are we scheduled to finish by June?
For 21-22.
For 22-23.
We will start just before Christmas, I think, for
Okay.
22-23.
Sorry, I've got my audits mixed up. We've got too many audits in my head. So I think we're still not going to be hitting the deadlines that in the accounts and audit regulations, because there is such a kind of catch up across not just your council, but across kind of every council that EY and other audit firms audit. So you'll know from the national picture that very few opinions were issued by the end of November. What I think we're aiming to do is to get the audits done in a more compressed timetable, which is what we've done this year. So although it might not be in the same timetable that you would envisage to meet the accounts and audit regulations dates, it is ensuring that we come in, we do an efficient audit that works well with the finance team, has minimum disruption. So I think that's what the focus is at the moment until we can get back on an even keel, which probably won't be until sort of the 23-24 audits.
Does that answer your question, John? Yeah. Thank you, Debbie. Are there any other questions? No, I can't see anybody coming up. Okay. I'm going to propose that we note this report. That's all we need to do as a committee. And I'd like a seconder, please. Councillor Billing is seconding. Is there any debate at all? I imagine not. Okay, Eleanor, can you take us to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thanks, Eleanor. We're moving on to item 9, which is the Statement of Accounts 2021-22. I'd like to invite Ian Cooper, Service Director, to present. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, apologies that we have got a very late addendum report for this one. So I'm referring to the addendum report and the addendum appendix in this summary. I think the reason why you've got this late addendum has hopefully made sort of clear in the previous item, but this is a kind of a fast moving, but it is moving kind of picture as we try to finalise the accounts to bring them to you this evening. As has been also highlighted, we're not quite there yet, which is the reason for the 3 new recommendations, 2.1 through to 2.3. The third one of those being a delegation seeking that's the chair of this committee to sign off the final accounts following the completion of audit work. That is on the basis that there are no substantial changes that come out from the final bits of audit work or from the review of the changes that we have made in response to those audit findings that have come out from Ernst & Young, because they've only been sent across to them sort of today, if they've even been sent across to them formally yet at all. Be rushed to get them out to you. I don't know if actually formally sent it across to Ernst & Young at the same time. So that's the reason for that delegation. So by substantial, I think what I mean is that if it relates to something different to what we've been discussing already, of which we've covered quite a few areas where we have made changes, or we've got any of the adjustments that are fundamentally wrong and they're sort of significant values. But if they're kind of in that arena of what we've been talking about tonight, I would to sort of cover that as if you approve that this recommendation that you're delegating authority to the chair to sign off those accounts when that work's completed. And as has been set out, we're aiming to it by the end of March to get that done. So moving into the report, it talks about the process we're following here and the dates that things are supposed to happen by. Obviously, we are where we are in terms of dates, and we are doing well compared to previous years around being able to hopefully approve accounts by the end of March. I will briefly cover paragraph 8.2 on the basis that whilst I did cover it in a pre-session before this meeting, not all councillors are able to make that, and obviously we are also being broadcast to the public world out there, so probably fair that I do kind of cover it in a bit more detail for them as well. So 8.2 does summarise the adjustments we are looking to make. The first of all of those does relate to duplicate expenditure, which was primarily found in relation to the material balance for Hitchin Tower Museum. So this was work that was completed way back in 2018-19. When the work was completed, the capital expenditure was correctly added to the capital to the fixed asset register to increase the capital value of that asset. But at the point that the asset was then subsequently revalued, the total value of the original asset plus the work that undertaken on it should have been adjusted back down to the revalued total. That didn't happen. The kind of the extra work that was done on the asset was kept in on the asset register as well. So that's an error which we need to reverse out. Because it's a material error, we have to go back and restate everything as though we'd corrected it at the right time, which is why you end up with a balance sheet changing all the way back sort of 2 years ago. It needed a restated balance the year before that as well. So that's the reason for all those kind of sea of green that's on the kind of the final document that you see before you, because all those adjustments had to sort of throw for that whole process. In relation to the other adjustments that are on that list in those bullet points, I think they're probably fairly well explained in both the bullet points that are in front of you there, and also Rachel's also provided a bit of a summary of those as well in terms of what the impacts of those have been. I think suffice to say, and I'll reiterate, none of these have an impact on the general fund. These are all impacts that essentially get reversed back out into our unusable reserves. So there is no effect on the council overall. But obviously, as I've sort of said in response to the question on the last item, I don't want to make mistakes. I want our accounts to be as accurate as they can be. I had a few mistakes, but it's probably a few too many this year. So yeah, in summary, in terms of the kind of the actions and the concerns that you have raised, you've got my response there in terms of what we're going to do about it. And that again relates back to that previous question I provided a response to. I will highlight paragraph 8.5. It's important I inform you that we are not aware of any events that have occurred since the year end that provide additional evidence of conditions that existed the 31st of March 2022 or material affect the amounts in statements of accounts, in particular not being subsequent events that require an amendment to the contingent assets or liabilities listed in the accounts. I can confirm that that was correct when I wrote the report. It is still correct at this date, and I will then confirm it again at the point we sign off the accounts when I kind of hopefully get delegation for the chair to do that again. Because if that does happen, then obviously that affects the sort of basis the accounts are done on. But at this stage, and hopefully will continue, that will be still the case. So hopefully you'll see that we've worked through all the things that have found and made those adjustments. We are not required to make adjustments from the findings that Ernst & Young find, but if they are material items, they will then give us a qualified opinion rather than unqualified opinion. As it stands, we are planning to make changes for all of those items, with the possible exception of the late item in terms of the pension funds, the sort of the last bit that Rachel referred to in her statements. Haven't concluded yet whether to adjust for that, but again, as Rachel has said in her presentation, that is very minor. So in terms of the delegation you're making to the chair, that would be covered by that either way in terms of that position. So hoping that you will accept those recommendations, but obviously happy to take any questions before that to provide any more reassurance that we have done the right thing and that you're happy with a place to approve those accounts.
Thank you, Ian. Do we have any questions for Ian? John Cannon.
Thank you. I think we had the answer in the training session prior, but for the meeting, by removing the double counted asset from the asset register, there would be a corresponding drop in depreciation charges, but that's a technical matter and does not release money to fund services from the general fund. True. And the second one, please. I remember some mention of a financial reporting control framework being developed, and I wondered if there's any news on that in view of the adjustments that have come up this time.
Sorry, Ian.
Thanks, Jeff. So in relation to your first question, yes, you are correct. What happens in local authority accounting is that the depreciation charge is charged to the service lines. It is then removed through the movement reserve statement and the comprehensive income and expenditure statement to essentially move into one of those unusable reserves. So therefore, it doesn't affect the general fund. It is a cost that is reversed back out again. So it's not affecting our kind of overall reserves that are usable. It is an unusable reserve movement. And in relation to sort of the control frameworks, we will always keep on top of any new guidance from SIPFA and keep training abreast of that. And obviously also implement our own controls around, and in this case, particularly the fixed asset register, to make sure we're on top of that and we're coming on to a report later in the agenda about the SIAS audit plan for future years. And you may, as part of that, want to see if we can find some audit days just to give greater assurance during next year around some work they could do to support the work that we're planning on doing on that.
Does that answer your question, John?
Thank you. It does.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, I'm going to read out the recommendations because if I am to be delegated, I don't want to be the proposer for it. So we will go into a debate and vote currently, but the items that we'll be voting on is that the committee notes that 2021 annual statement of accounts amended version is set out in Appendix A. That the committee notes the audit work completed to date, that findings from the work and the resulting charges made to the statement of accounts. And 3, that the subject to the final audit will not require any substantial change to the statement of accounts. The committee delegates to the chair of the committee the final approval of the 2021-22 accounts. This will include confirming that the chair and the committee can sign a statement of accounts to confirm that they have been approved by the committee. So that's what we vote on. Is there any debate about that? Any? Okay. In that case, can I have a proposer, please, for those recommendations? Yeah, Councillor Nolan, and a seconder. Councillor Billing, seconding. In that case, Eleanor, can you take us to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thanks, Eleanor. I believe that we may be able to release our friends from Ernst & Young. Debbie and Rachel, thanks very much for coming. And safe journeys home. Bye-bye. Right, moving on to item 10, this SAFA's proposed anti-fraud plan 23-24 and the progress with delivery of 22-23 audit plan. Can I invite Nick Jennings to present?
Good evening, Chair.
Good evening.
Hello there. Yes, two reports that should be with you this evening, as you've mentioned. One is the proposed plan for 23-24, and the second part of the report will be an update on the current plan that I have in place for 22-23. Unfortunately, there isn't a written version of the second part. So with your permission, actually, Chair, I'd like to take that part first and actually talk about the work that we're doing at the moment for the authority.
Sure, please do.
So last time we presented to this committee was back on the 7th of December, and we provided an update with our work at that point. There was a plan in place for 22-23 that was agreed by this committee in March 2022, and that's the plan that we're still working to at the moment. And we will provide a final report in the summer this year, looking back over that period and provide full details of all of the work undertaken for North Herts Council. Very, very briefly, I'm just going to touch on some of the work that's going on at present. Following that meeting in December, we were able to deliver anti-money laundering training for officers within legal services, finance, procurement, and your revenues and benefits services. That was training that we delivered in line with the council's policy. That was very well received by officers attending. We continue to deliver other fraud awareness training to other services across the council, and we will continue to do that as part of our plan for 23-24 as well. It's very important that officers are aware of their fraud risks. They're aware of what fraud looks like within their particular service areas, and they're able to report that fraud effectively as well. And just talking about reporting fraud for North Herts Council, so far this year we've had 76 referrals or allegations of fraud affecting council services. 32 of those came from staff, so that shows that staff are obviously aware of their fraud risk and able to report those into the shared anti-fraud service. We currently have 41 live cases subject to investigation with an estimated fraud loss. That's a potential fraud loss. It's not real at present, but an estimate of around £154,000. And those cases are still under investigation at present. To the end of February, we had closed 36 investigations, 26 of which had identified fraud or error or irregularity, valued at just over £100,000 in total. And we have mentioned, as I mentioned already, a number of cases that are live ongoing with those investigations, when we're working very, very closely with the council's legal team to bring prosecutions in 2 cases at present. Chair, happy to take any questions that the committee might have on the work for 22-23. Appreciate that's a very, very brief overview of what we're doing. If there aren't any questions, I'm then very happy to proceed in the second part of the report, where we're looking at the plan for next year.
Thanks, Nick. Are there any questions for Nick at this point? No, please continue, Nick.
Super, that's great. So the plan for next year, for 23-24, is a report that we've provided to committee. So if I can just draw members' attention really to section 8 of that report, and that talks about section 3 of the report as well, where we are referring back to guidance and best practice that's produced by a number of organisations such as the Local Government Association, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, National Audit Office, SIPFA and others, where they are recommending that organisations have effective and robust counter-fraud and corruption measures. And above all, an organisation should have a plan to protect itself against fraud. Council officers and the SAPS management team have developed and agreed a plan for the authority for 23-24, and that's attached to Appendix A of the report. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about the plan itself, but just to make it clear that the plan has been designed to meet the recommendations of the Fighting Fraud and Corruption Locally strategy. This is a strategy which is commended by SIPFA, CIFAS and the Local Government Association, as well as Solace, for local authorities, and the plan includes particular pillars around protect, govern, acknowledge and pursue, and we really do build the whole plan around those pillars. The plan also identifies officers within the council and within the shared anti-fraud service, as well as members who will have a role in delivering that plan for next year. And within the plan itself, we have a separate appendix which lists all of the activity, all of the actions that will be undertaken next year to ensure that we protect the authority against fraud. We understand what the fraud risks are, and as mentioned before, officers, members and members of the public are all able to report any concerns around fraud into the council, and those matters can be dealt with. It really is important to note that this committee also has a role in ensuring those key elements in the plan are implemented and monitoring the activity that's undertaken to protect the authority as well. Just for members' note, really, we have included a list of background papers just in case anybody's struggling to sleep at night. There are a number of recent reports that have come out, in particular the International Public Sector Fraud Forum guidance was issued last year. Is an interesting read around public sector fraud, if anybody's struggling to sleep at night. But otherwise, there's an interesting reading list there for members to review at their leisure. At that point, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nick. Do we have any questions for Nick on the subject? No, we have no questions for you on that.
Good stuff. Thank you.
In that case, I'm going to propose that we note this report and review and approve the anti-fraud plan 23-24. Can I have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Nolan, seconding. Any debate? No, no debate. In that case, Eleanor, can you take us to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you, Eleanor. Now moving on to item 11, the audit plan 23-24. I'd like to invite Chris Wood to present, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I wondered if I might just return to a previous item. Actually, in my lack of familiarity with Zoom meant that I actually couldn't get my hand up on the local code of governance, but I just wanted to add that SIS come along to the Council's risk and performance group regularly and do a shared learning slot where we talk about governance issues, most recently, for example, at Thanet and Cheshire East, and as well as previously on Middlesbrough. So I just wanted to make that point. And I think another point to make, particularly having just had an item from SAFS, is that if the work of SAFS is not reflected in the local code of governance and in the AGS, it's probably just worth reflecting that in there, but it may well already have been done so. So probably more pertinently coming to the item on the audit plan, given that I've recently delivered training to the audit committee back in January, I don't propose to dwell on the process for planning, which I think we covered sufficiently that day. So, suffice to say that the audit plan was approved by the leadership team before coming to the audit committee and has been extensively discussed with officers. So this year we're purchasing 260 days in the audit plan, and that is laid out in Appendix A, I think it is. Performance indicators as well in Section 3, which have been agreed for next year, are also laid out. There's no change to this year in terms of the performance indicators we'll be bringing. Also to note, just specifically, there's quite extensive coverage of Churchgate in this year's audit plan, particularly because it's a high risk within the Council's risk register and delivery plan. We have one extra technology audit this year compared to the prior year, and also a small reserve list is laid out in the plan as well. Just to remind members that this is a dynamic plan and that throughout the year, as we risk assess items in the plan against new risks emerging, the plan is of course flexible to add new items into it. So if I take that as my introduction, and are there any questions?
Do we have any questions for Chris on this one? Yes, Councillor Nolan.
Hi, Chris. So it's referring back to some points you made previously when you've presented to the committee, primarily around resource and the sort of risk that's presented there. I just wondered if you had any update on the availability of resource to undertake the audits set out in the plan, and whether you've been able to mitigate that potentially affecting the work going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan. Yes, I do actually touch on this in my next paper relating to delivery of the 22-23 audit plan. So once again, we've appointed BDO as to provide our additional resilience. They've been awarded another 4-year tender. As in this year, when we exhausted the capacity of BDO, we have also procured resource from Mazars and from a firm called Verital, who have provided additional capacity. I'll touch on the impact on the 22-23 audit plan, but we believe we've got enough resource or access to enough resource to deliver the 23-24 plan, and certainly to meet our reporting requirements around delivering an annual assurance opinion. We have been out to market recently as well, again, to recruit 2 vacancies. And although it's not been entirely successful, we've shortlisted some candidates to a couple of those roles and are hopeful of appointments, but I'm in a public forum, so I couldn't possibly comment any further on those outcomes. I hope that's answered your question, Councillor Nolan.
Exactly what I was going to ask. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Oh, sorry, we have John Cannon.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Chris. Great to see coverage of Churchgate coming up next year, particularly with this year's plan having dealt with other high priority risk areas. So it makes perfect sense. I suppose it's a question and a request in combination. Can you give us some comfort that the audits over Churchgate will look beyond due process and good governance and look at some of the assumptions and the technical data within the programme? I ask because it's very easy for bad decisions to go through perfect governance. So we need to get both bases covered.
The risk is absolutely right. In fact, many of the authorities I mentioned in my first comment relating to some other local authorities had perfect arrangements, but ultimately coming down to relationships and the way people operate and the way controls are operated don't always marry up. I think we would certainly cover off some of that risk. The bit that I can't commit to is actually whether we have the skill set around what I call extremely technical requirements. But certainly we can comment on assumptions, challenge assumptions. And some of it is around good process and things like public consultation and ensuring that kind of thing's carried out and that views are heard, and ensuring that and I believe public consultation has closed recently as well. So yes, a lot of it will be process driven, but we're always on the lookout for process and control that hasn't operated as such. And around culture within authorities, I think that's certainly on our radar. I'm not sure if that's entirely answered your question. Sorry, Councillor Taylor, you're probably going to ask that again too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. John, does that answer your question?
I think that's a proportionate, reasonable response at this stage. It's good to keep it on the radar, please.
Yes, absolutely. John, I think we certainly remain alert to that. And when we come to scope things more closely, we certainly will take account of your comments. I think they're vital.
That's great, Chris. You're going to take into consideration. Have we got any further questions for Chris? No. Okay. In that case, the recommendations are members are recommended to approve the proposed North Arts Council internal audit plan for 2023-24. That's what we're going to be voting on. But first, is there any debate on it? No, I didn't think there would be. In that case, Eleanor, can you take us to the vote, please?
Sorry, do we have a proposer for that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I forgot about that. I was going to propose. Thank you, Eleanor. I propose that we accept that. Seconder, yeah, please. And Councillor Claire Billing is seconding. Thank you, Eleanor. Okay, you can take us to a vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thank you, Eleanor. Moving on to item 12, then the Q3 2022-23 audit update report. And we're going to be asking Chris to give us an update. Chris?
Thank you again, Chair. So I primarily wanted to give an update on the position, given this report was 2 weeks ago, and we're nearing the year end, and I suspect members want to know how delivery's going, given as Councillor Nolan has raised resources and capacity issues in years. So just referring to the performance stats first, actually, since I think this is arguably my most important message, probably down in circa paragraph 211. So actually we've moved on to, or 212 as well, should I add. We've since moved on to 83% of the audit days in the plan delivered, and also 63% of the projects delivered. There's a significant amount of work that's in advanced field work stage, and we actually anticipate, and I'm going to be cautiously optimistic, at least 24 audits or so out of the 27 or 28. We've had one cancelled since then. or at least deferred to just after the year end. So we anticipate over 80% to be delivered in year, and certainly as things stand, all things being equal, have delivered 100% of the plan by the time we come to deliver the annual assurance opinion. So actually there's been significant progress since the additional resource from Mazars and Veritas has been brought to bear. And also thank you to the officers who have cooperated with a significant number of audits that are currently in train. It's a two-way street auditing, and we can't do it without North Hart's officers. So just to reiterate, thanks on that. Members will have seen a significant number of final audit reports come through. Some of those are listed here, and one additional one on climate emergency, which was issued just after this report was prepared. Just to note that one in the business continuity planning is a limited assurance report with one new high priority recommendation, which will be reported in our progress reports for members to keep an eye on and to monitor. And similarly, in the recently issued climate emergency report, there was also, which was also limited assurance, we had one more high priority recommendation in there too. Going back through the report to paragraph 2.6, we are required to report on implementation of high priority recommendations to you. So members will be aware that there were 3 made in the Revs and Benefit System Technical Team Audit. Those have implementation dates at the end of this month, so we'll expect those reported when I next come back to you. The Careline Operations High Priority Internal Audit Recommendation has been implemented according to updates on Pentana. And as already mentioned, we'll be reporting back to you on business continuity planning and the climate emergency high priority recommendations in future reports. I also need to bring to your attention the one proposed amendment to the plan since I last brought a report to you, which was the strategic planning was deferred to the 23-24 audit plan just presented at item 11. And its replacement with a community lottery audit. So that is documented there for you. I think that's mainly what I wanted to bring to your attention. So again, happy to take questions.
Do we have any questions for Chris on this subject? No questions. Thanks, Chris. The recommendations for this item are that note the SIS progress report for the period of 17th to the 17th of February 2023, and also to approve the plan amendments to 22-23 internal audit plan. Can I have a proposer, please? Yeah, Councillor Sean Nolan. Seconder. Councillor Claire Billy. Is there any debate on this? I'm guessing not. In that case, Eleanor, can you take us to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you, Eleanor. Now on to item 13 then, the third quarter review budget monitoring. And I invite Ian Cooper, Services Director, to present.
Thank you, Chair. This is the standard quarterly reports on the revenue budget position. So that's the day-to-day expenditure rather than the capital one, which is coming up next. So we're up to quarter 3 now, so period up to the end of December. So just how we've been so far, we had quarter 1 and quarter 2, and then as part of the budget report, which came both through this committee and through Cabinet onto full council, we did a review of position as at the end of month 8, by the end of November. So this is building on that report that went to through this committee and onto council as part of that month 8 review. As you'll note from the table 3, there are a lot of variances reported this time. there are quite a few in relation to staffing. We've had in quite a few areas some issues recruiting to staff, and therefore we have been a combination of muddling through with the staff we have got in post, which is always difficult to achieve, and using some agency staff as well at the same time. Given that agency staff can be quite expensive, it's quite difficult sometimes to forecast how much it's going to cost. So it sort of comes quite late in the year when we declare what the unspent that's going to be, albeit maybe some of that could be reported a little bit earlier than it has been here. But yeah, picking out some of the other big movements, interest, investment income, again, is increasing as the base rate continues to increase during the year. The returns we get on our money are going up and up and up. So that's the various £151,000 there. The sort of other big movements, picking on the commingled recycling, haulage and processing costs. The market for recycled materials is going all over the place, to be honest. Early in the year, we reported a big movement in terms of increased income from that. And now we're moving the other way as material markets have moved again during the year. So yeah, that's moving up and down and pretty much back we started, which is, well, we didn't adjust the budget when we report the first variance in terms of the good news at the start of the year, because it's gone back again. So the budget for next year is still sound because it was based on the original budget rather than the previously recalculated budget. In relation to staffing, there is the paragraph 8.2 and a recommendation for Cabinet to consider in relation to the carry forward of some of that staffing underspend to look at resourcing of staffing in next year and possibly further into the year after as well. That's to reflect the various issues that are highlighted there, particularly in relation to development management and planning, and kind of keeping that on an even keel, given all the various things that are going to go on in that area over that period, but also looking more widely at whether using some of that money in that kind of short term, this is not an ongoing staff resource looking at here, in that short term, whether that would help us achieve more of our council priorities and also protect our staff, to be honest, in terms of making sure that no one is getting a unduly heavy workload that kind of puts them under sort of significant amounts of stress or pressure. So that's essentially the Cabinet to consider, which you might want to comment on. In relation to the remainder of the report, it's the usual format. We've got the performance indicators in relation to the finances and the supporting data in tables 4 and 5. And then the final thing I was just going to highlight is table 6 and the general fund impact. Obviously, you'll note that the forecast general fund balance at the end of the year is, I guess, much more positive than it was, given the variances we've got this year in terms of, it's increasing the general fund balance at the end of the year. But I would sort of caution that a little bit. Obviously, it is good, but in terms of the finances we've got, but note that the recommendation is that there's a carry forward request of £514,000 as covered in table 2. So that'll be additional expenditure occurred next year against that increased general fund balance than what had been budgeted. So yeah, that sort of takes away some of that difference. And also note that the release of the Mausoleum Cemetery Reserve is just a transfer between reserves. So whilst it's going to general fund, it was in reserve before as well. So it's moving things around rather than sort of genuine kind of new additional balance in the general fund balance. So it is still an increase. It is still money that sort of helps our ongoing position. And as I highlighted in the budget reports, that caution around the fact that we have got some big stuff coming in terms of potential government funding cuts, 2 big contracts up for renewal over the next couple of years, and therefore having a healthy general fund balance with those potential impacts on our ongoing revenue is a place that is a good place to be. And certainly we should be resting our laurels going, everything's fine. There are still big sort of financial concerns to be worried about and be a need to react to in the medium term. So that's kind of my introduction to the report. And I'm happy to take any questions you've got on any of the more detailed content that's in there.
Thank you, Ian. Do we have any questions for Ian? Nope, you don't. Thank you, Ian. Just to let you know that this report is presented to ourselves for a comment and before referral to Cabinet. So the recommendations are that the Finance and Audit Risk Committee recommend to the Cabinet that 1, the Cabinet note this report, and 2, that the Cabinet approves changes to 22-23 General Fund budget as identified in Table 3 and paragraph 8.3 of 1.09 million decreased in the net expenditure. I think there's more. Yes. The Cabinet approves the changes to 23-24 General Fund budget as identified in Table 3 of Table 3 and paragraph 8.3 of a total of 549k increase in net expenditure. The Cabinet approves the use of 140k of salary budget carrier forward for additional service director capacity for an 18-month period, and the allocation of the remainder, if needed, will be delegated to the managing director or head of paid service in consultation with the leader, deputy leader, and executive members for finance and IT. That's what we're going to be voting on. I propose it. Can I have a seconder, please? Yeah. Councillor Billing to second. In that case, is there any debate? Anybody? No. In that case, Eleanor, can you take us to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thank you, Eleanor. Now to item 14, which is the last item on the meeting. You might be pleased to hear. Item 14 then, third quarter investment strategy, capital and treasury review 2022-23, and we invite Ian Cooper to present.
Thank you, Chair. So this one is a combination of our capital position, either spent on those fixed asset items, the things that you kind of have a physical thing that lasts more than 1 year, and also where we are on our treasury position for the year as well. In relation to the capital side, which is kind of covered by the sort of first probably half of section 8 of the report, and table 2 in particular, we're kind of at a stage of the year where we reassess where we are on these capital projects and whether they're going to be completed in time at the end of the year. And there are a number of items there around capital slippage where we're not going to complete this year, and so therefore the request is to move the money into next year to undertake the next year instead. There are a couple of items in table 3, one of which is the use of section 106 money, and the other being the North Herts Museum platform lift. We had a capital allocation in there to replace it, but thankfully we've finally managed to find a way to actually repair what was there already, and that is now seems to be running reasonably well. So therefore there is no need to replace that lift at this stage, and therefore that capital allocation can be removed. So that's why we're on capital. In relation to treasury, as I highlighted in the last report, we are in a position where we are generating a lot more interest on our treasury investments. We were particularly this time last year when we were hardly getting anything at all on those investments. So that section of the report sort of sets out what interest we're earning, the split of those investments. There's still a high proportion of our money with government, which reflects that the DMO are still paying good interest returns. In general, there's a couple of banks that will pay higher than the DMO, but mostly they'll pay less. As we have an unlimited kind of capacity to invest with government under the Treasury strategy, deemed to be safer than investing with banks, then on that basis, we are continuing to use them where it makes sense. Also, the advantage of the DMOs, you can get rates for any period you want, from 1 day through to a year and beyond. So, there's much more flexibility there as well. But we are sort of trying to make sure we can maintain a spread of investments. And we're also now looking at, as we move towards the end of the year, making sure we've got a spread of maturity dates on our investments, because we are aware that at some point interest rates will start to move again, probably come down again at some point. It might go up a little bit more first, but they will come down again. So yeah, making sure we've got a spread so we're kind of covering our reinvestment risk over that period as well. And then the table in section 8.13 just details all our investments as they stand at the end of that quarter, and what the returns we're getting at that point. So that's my brief summary of the report. You've also got the Appendix A, which is always attached to these reports, which has all the more detail in it. But I won't dwell on that. But if there's any questions on that, I'm happy to answer them.
you have any questions for Ian? Councillor Nolan.
Yeah, just looking at the table under paragraph 8.13, which shows that we currently have money that's been borrowed by Worcestershire County Council. Is that an option that we've looked at previously for funding to take money from other councils ourselves, or is that purely something that we've done as an investment in this case?
That is something that used to be much more common. So, local authorities need money. Sometimes they borrow, sometimes they invest, depending on what their cash flow is looking like. In the past, it used to be that other local authorities would pay a rate that was kind of commensurate in line with what banks and building societies would pay. We went through a phase with COVID where actually they were paying very little compared to what we could earn from banks. So therefore, we ended this shift away from providing money to other local authorities and then paying a return for that investment. We're finding more and more that they are paying more realistic rates now. So when we actually come to the next quarter report, you'll find more local authorities on that list. So yeah, it's just a case of they need cash. We've got cash. We're talking here about purely cash flow cash. These are local authorities will have a budget, a sustainable budget over the medium term. They are not kind of borrowing to kind of prop up their general fund balances. They're borrowing for cash flow at that point in time. They will have offsetting that other investments that have different maturity dates, and so therefore they're not at risk of not paying us back. We do a check on local authorities around avoiding those where there may be potential issues with their finances, and we don't tend to take investments in terms of invest money with those. So there is a list of do not use. I'm not going to recite it here because that would be a bit unfair on those local authorities, but we do pay heed to that. As far as there's no concerns about Worcestershire County Council, I have nothing to say about there in terms of, we do know to be fine, and therefore fully expect to get money back at the end of the investment.
Does that answer your question, Sean? Yeah. Any other questions? No. This report is presented to ourselves for comment before referable to Cabinet. I can go through the recommendations actually as well. That the Finance and Audit Risk Committee recommend to Cabinet 2.1. The Cabinet notes that the forecast expenditure of 8.37 million in 2022-23 on capital programme, paragraph 8.3 refers to. 2.2, that the Cabinet approves the adjustments to the capital programme 22-23 onwards as a result of revised timetables of schemes detailed in tables 2 and 3, increasing the estimated spend for in 2023 and 24 by 1.554 million. 2.3, that the Cabinet notes the position of the availability of capital resources as detailed in table 4, paragraph 8.6, and requires to keep the capital programme under review for affordability. And 2.4, the Cabinet asks to note the position of the Treasury Management activity at the end of December 22. I propose this. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Nolan is seconding. Is there any debate? I'm figuring not. In that case, Eleanor, can you take us to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thank you, Eleanor. That concludes our business for this evening. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming in, especially with the bad weather. I'm going to close this meeting at 20:49.